This is the fourth and final episode to the podcast series that Tortoise put out on the Neil Gaiman allegations, and it's primarily focused on Kay, who is sort of the second woman in these allegations.
Before we begin, I just need to warn you, this is a hard listen at times. The episode contains graphic descriptions of sex and allegations of sexual abuse.
How are you?
I'm good, how are you?
I'm alright.
Our journey into the world of comics has led us to a woman in Atlanta, in the United States. She's recently moved house and came across an old digital camera. She thinks there's something important on it, and so plugs it into her computer. And she finds dozens of images of her and Neil Gaiman. Some intimate, some sexual even. Photos she says he told her that she shouldn't have. She creates a new folder and calls it Evidence, and files away the images. Maybe one day I'll be able to tell that story, she thinks. Maybe one day I'll get a call, an email. One day, maybe. A week later, my email landed in her inbox. She says the two events, finding the camera, the email, set off an emotional storm, and so she agrees to talk. But she's cautious.
I never wanted any of the stuff he did to me, including the more violent stuff. But I did consent to it, you know.
She's now in her late 30s, but the story she tells us dates back 20 years and hinges on the same allegations as Scarlett. Consent, rough sex, emotional manipulation, exploitation. All the he said, she said, grey areas that made the New Zealand police so wary of pursuing Scarlett's criminal complaint.
It's such a murky line, and it's also part of why it's hard for me to talk about, and it's not something that I during the Me Too movement, I don't have a leg to stand on. I don't have video proof of this, that it did happen.
She sends me many photos.
Yeah, and again, not a lot of hard evidence or documentation in this, so mostly what we're going off of here is that Kay and Scarlett's stories share quite a few similarities.
Of her and Neil Gaiman, emails between them, and contemporaneous chats she had with friends about him. And she agrees to be recorded. She says she's repelled by the idea that her name will be forever linked with his, and so we aren't using it. She says we can use her first initial, K. Neil Gaiman's position is the two of them were in a 2-year romantic relationship, which ended many years ago, and they have exchanged hundreds of emails over the years. According to his position, this correspondence in no way demonstrates any repulsion, and that he never engaged in any non-consensual sexual act with her.
Right.
And he says that a lot there. I cut it out a few times just because it gets to be repetitive, but basically that's his response to all of this, is that either he disputes that it happened, or for most of it, he says it was all consensual.
Drove down with my two friends. I don't remember what the signings were, but this was in fall 2003.
Neil Gaiman's doing a book signing in Sarasota in Florida. Kay's in high school. She's a typical teenage fangirl, just 18, excited to meet her idol. He's around 43 years old.
We hung back to the end so that we would have more time to talk to him. And we brought him a little bucket full of goofy presents, and just goofed around and then took our picture. And it wasn't a very long interaction. It's maybe 5 minutes tops.
The three pals do the same thing again, this time at a book signing in North Carolina. They begin emailing him via his website.
Sometimes I would almost just treat it like a diary, almost like, "Dear Neil, today I did this in class. I had this thing happen to me," and then would set it off into the ether and kind of forget about it unless he wrote back, and then we might have a few back and forths.
Sometimes.
So she's clearly a very big fan of Neil, at a very...
Neil Gaiman would reply, light-hearted, casual. But the next summer, Kay and her girlfriends get an email. Neil Gaiman's coming to Florida to write. Would they like to come and have dinner?
We were all very excited, of course, and drove down there and had dinner at a barbecue restaurant with him, I think. I remember I was excited and trying to not let there be too many awkward pauses. And that was all pretty benign. There may have been some kisses on the cheeks when we said goodbye.
6 months later, there's another invitation to dinner. This time, 2 of them go along.
We had come to an ice cream place after dinner, and we made a big deal of pretending like it was his birthday because it was an American ice cream place, and these poor kids had to sing a song if they thought it was your birthday. We were 18 or 20 at the time and thought it would be really funny if they had to sing, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so we, faked that it was his birthday, and I remember...
The friends go back to his house after the ice cream and the birthday jokes.
Somehow it had been decided that we were going to spend the night. There was a huge house, there were a ton of rooms, you can pick wherever you want. It's late, just stay here.
Just after Neil Gaiman's gone to his room and Kay and her friend are still talking out on the porch, he comes back out as if he'd forgotten.
So they've met casually a few times, sort of in the way that a fan might meet a famous person, but this is the first time that they're actually sort of in private together at all, and this is how he approaches.
And something maybe.
And said, "Do you guys want to go to bed with me?"
Which is very similar to how he approached Scarlett, the first day that she was stopping at his house to get an idea of what her nannying job would be like. He went for it.
The age of consent in Florida is 18, so they're legal. The question, so casually posed to these 2 young friends, Do they want to go to bed with a married man in his 40s they've only met a couple of times together? Well, this is how he sold it.
Oh, you guys said it was my birthday. This would be a great birthday present. You guys both came to bed with me. No thanks. And he said okay and went back to his room, and we kind of never talked about it. We were just kind of like, that was weird.
So he asked them if they wanted to have sex and accepted their refusal. After Kay turns 20, though, things shift. The attention from Neil Gaiman, the intensity, ramp up. She's literally in his sights.
We exchanged phone numbers, and we would have chats on the phone, and one time he sent me a webcam.
And the webcam thing, how did he broach that? Did he just say, this would be fun for us to talk?
Yeah, it'd be nice to be able to see you when we talk. And of course, that was very flattering. And that probably went on for about 6 months or so. And then he came back, and he came to Orlando this time with like the express purpose to see me, and took me out to sushi and offered to buy me a drink, and that's when we slept together for the first time.
He paid her attention, paid for drinks, they slept together. So Kay's sexual relationship with Neil Gaiman starts differently to how Scarlett says hers did. Both women were more or less the same age. They were both under his thumb, one as a fan and the other as a nanny to his child. But Kay's sexual relationship with him begins with a consensual act.
Meanwhile, Neil Gaiman was blogging about his marriage to fans and readers. This was his first then.
I was really shy, and I knew that I have a lot of self-esteem issues. I got the feeling that he was ashamed of me, and he kept being like, I'm not ashamed of you. I'm like, well, but you don't tell anybody that we're dating. Like, nobody knows you have a girlfriend. You're still technically married. I feel like you don't value me. And he would be saying like, I'm like a ship turning. It takes me a long time. Like, he bought me a book called like How to Understand the English, which
Yeah, so she's kind of his side piece, and she's feeling a type of way about that, and he's like, no, that's on you. That's why you feel that way. You need to read a book or whatever to understand why what we're doing is totally okay. And
to be fair, there was quite the age and culture gap.
Remember, Kay is his daughter's age. She's starting her adult life as his secret girlfriend. He's nervy about being around her in public. He invites her to events, but then doesn't acknowledge she's there. Neil Gaiman's position rejects the notion that he was ashamed of his relationship with Kay. Him inviting her to prestigious events is cited as evidence of this position. Still, Kay is young, broke, and insecure. She has a disabled brother who she cares for, and her parents are splitting up around the time her relationship with Neil Gaiman begins. In other words, she is vulnerable.
At this point, like, all of my worth is attached to like, I am dating a famous person. Like, I am a zookeeper, and then it's cool, I guess. That's like a fun thing I can tell people. But like, the really interesting thing about me is that I'm dating this guy who has this exciting life, and by proxy, I am exciting. Like, he could do whatever he wanted, and I would do whatever it took to keep that relationship going.
so she's saying that, according to her, Neil had all of the power in the relationship because she would have done anything for him.
Whatever he wanted, whatever it took, from the start. When did things with him become rough?
Straight away, he was very unconcerned with my pleasure, and he certainly didn't have anything like lube around, and I didn't know enough. So I remember the first time we had sex, I remember like lying there, and there was music on, and there was a song that I really loved. It was a very romantic, loving song, and I was listening to it while this very painful act was happening to me, and just tears kind of just remember like thinking like, I've listened to this song so many times and imagined like someone loving me like someone in the song loves whoever they're singing about, and instead this brutal, painful thing was happening to me.
To this soundtrack, an allegation of pain and no lubrication, of sexual behavior that seems very similar to Scarlett's allegations. But that's almost 20 years earlier. She also doesn't tell Neil Gaiman that it's not okay to do this.
Yeah, so same behavior 20 years later with two women who don't know each other in different countries.
Not at this stage, anyway. Having heard Scarlett's allegations about Neil Gaiman's sexual behavior, I wanted to know whether this rang any bells.
There was never choking.
So, Scarlett, there was one episode where she said she almost passed out from the pain of him penetrating her anally without any lube.
That happened to me too. It didn't happen the first time. He was trying to like coach me to just relax, and the tenser I was, the more it would hurt. So it was my fault if it hurt, not his.
Kay says he used a belt on her, just as Scarlett said. And yes, they both say that Neil Gaiman made them call him master. These appear to be aspects of his sexual fingerprint that span almost 20 years.
His hand, like he really liked spanking and like hitting that area. And he would say like, oh, I wouldn't do it, but I know you like it. And I didn't, very much didn't. Like, it was like, I vocal like, that hurts, like, maybe not so hard. And he'd be like, no, I can tell that you like it. He would complain.
So just totally steamrolling her boundaries. She's saying, I don't like this, it hurts, don't do it. And then he just says, no, none of that's true.
Often, like, whenever I come to see you, you don't have sex with me enough. So it was a contentious thing between us. And so I often felt if it was somewhere that he'd like, spent money to take me, or like, I felt that I owed it. And he definitely took advantage of that.
On the 4th of April 2007, Neil Gaiman flew Kay from Los Angeles to Heathrow for a fortnight's holiday together in the UK, alone, the two of them. Kay tells us she was excited to be on this amazing trip with her famous boyfriend and not have to sneak around. From his messages to her, it seemed like he was too. He spent the days in Cornwall mostly writing The Graveyard
Skip part. They went to a bunch of different places and hopped around or whatever, but then this is where they kind of have, they get into it.
book, and then they'd occasionally go for walks or drives. She sent us photos from that trip. Beaches, pubs, cliffs, glens, scarves, the heavy grey skies of the Scottish and Cornish summer. She looks happy. When you see their faces together in the photos, he's unshaven, craggy. She's around 22. She looks so young.
There were a lot of arguments. There was a lot of roughness that I felt compelled to take.
What the photos also don't show is Kay's intimate agony. She told us that on that trip, she had her period and then a bad urinary tract infection.
I couldn't sit down. He would say, you know, I want to fool around, like, you know, and I would say, okay, we can fool around, but you can't put anything in my vagina. You just can't, because I will die. And it didn't matter. He did it anyway. Very specifically said, you cannot put anything in me. Please don't. It will hurt very badly, and it will make things worse than they already are. Because I know for sure, I remember for sure in Cornwall saying those words out loud. It wasn't just a discussion about like, that hurts, like, because I can't remember if I said that hurts, don't do it, or like, please stop. I can't remember those other instances. I know we discussed it. I know it was a big part of why he would get upset at me, and I knew that it was like something that I had to do to keep him around. Like, it was expected of me. But in Cornwall, I remember because of that UTI, and it was so painful that like I couldn't do anything. Like I couldn't enjoy.
So usually she's saying she would kind of just put up with it, push through it, but it was so painful here that she knows she said more than just a generically ouch or stop or anything like that. Like she said, you cannot do this. It's way too painful. You have to stop. And again, he just steamrolls her boundaries and does it anyway.
The fact that I was in Cornwall, like I was just in like screaming agony, and I know I said it out loud then.
On the 16th of April 2007, Neil Gaiman drove Kay to Heathrow for her flight back to Los Angeles. She says they stopped several times along the way so she could pee because of her UTI. She says it felt more painful because of the penetrative sex he allegedly performed on her without her consent. As to this specific allegation, Neil Gaiman's clear position is that it is false. And again, he denies any unlawful behaviour with her. He didn't respond to any other specific points or questions about this trip.
Kay has never made a complaint to the police against Neil Gaiman, and so this allegation is very far from ever having been tested in court. Kay's relationship with Neil Gaiman ends during a trip to Orlando in Florida. Kay had a badly infected eye and didn't feel like going out. She wanted to have breakfast in, he didn't. They argued, and Neil Gaiman cancelled the rest of their hotel booking, changed his flight, and left for Minneapolis, where his then-wife lived at the time.
I followed him to the airport. I called my mom, sobbing that he was breaking up with me, and I had to get to the airport to like talk him out of it. Bought a $500 ticket on his flight, got onto the plane, like kneeled in the seat in front of him.
And this really illustrates, you know, how much of a fan, how obsessed she was with this guy. This is, you know, almost like a movie scene, the way that she pursues this guy and tries to save the relationship or salvage it.
It's like, please don't do this, please don't break up with me. And he was not having it. He was like, somebody get her off the plane, get her off the plane. Like, they dragged me off the plane, I'm sobbing. It ended up refunding my ticket, I think more out of just like, please God, get this crying girl out of our face. And then I had to drive home to my dad's house, blind in one eye, because I didn't know what to do. And that was the end.
Neil Gaiman's account is that he denies he demanded Kay be removed from the plane. He didn't respond to any other detailed points or specific questions about this trip. That scene on the plane, in which Kay ultimately walked off the aircraft, was in October 2008. In a chat dated the 24th of October, one of Kay's friends asks why she doesn't just break up with him. Kay replies, I don't know, adding, I'm now on Xanax because he says I need to control my temper. Xanax is a prescription tranquilizer.
So he gets her, on top of all of this, he gets her on Xanax too, because, I mean, to me, that seems like he wants even more control. It needs her to be more pliable and passive.
Used to treat depression, anxiety, and panic disorders. Despite her humiliation on that day, Kay stays in touch with Neil Gaiman. They exchange many emails up until 2022. But something in Kay had already begun changing.
The shift in my thinking about my relationship with him began both as I got older and realized that 18-year-olds and 20-year-olds, when you're in your 40s, look like kids. Something about this, now that I'm looking back on it, is very wrong. And also, as the conversation, the Me Too stuff, and more of that stuff became more nuanced, that was when I was like, well, wait a minute, something like that happened to me.
Neil Gaiman's position is that Kay's allegations against him are motivated by her regret over their sexual relationship. Yet his position is also that Kay's regret is evidentially deficient, because her emails appeared to him as genial, positive, and at times going back to 2010, flirtatious and solicitous. In support of this position,
Yeah, and again, that's why this is all kind of so muddy, is that, at the time, the women seemed more or less happy about being in a relationship with them. And it's now that they have the perspective that comes with some more age that they realize, ooh, I'm not nearly as okay with what happened to me as I was at the time.
Neil Gaiman's account cites an email Kay sent him on the 16th of September 2017. The email says, "If I just happened to fly to the UK just very casually on a whim, you would tell me what hotel lobby to hang out in, right? My neglected loins are looking at cheap flight options even as I type this." When we asked Kay about this email, she provided us with the full thread. It shows that Kay's email was in response to one Neil Gaiman sent her, one that started their email exchange and contained only a photo of the actor David Tennant in costume for a Good Omens production. Kay says Neil Gaiman knew she fancied David Tennant, and that the reference to a hotel lobby in her email is to the lobby of whatever hotel that David Tennant was staying in. In fact, Neil Gaiman responds to Kay's email saying he'd give her the name of the actor's hotel if she sent him photos of her breasts and bottom. Kay declined.
Yeah, it's very weird. He offers her like some in with a celebrity that she's a fan of if she sends him some nude pictures. So, clearly using his influence to try to get what he wants from her, strong arm her into giving pictures that, she said she doesn't want to give.
Neil Gaiman's position is that Kay would also email him asking for tickets to events and for career advice. Kay emails Neil Gaiman to ask whether he can help her friends with tickets to a comic convention. He replies soon after, offering to help, and then volunteering that his new GF is the most beautiful person I've ever been with, which proves I am crazy, I guess. When Kay asks whether Amanda Palmer is okay with his new girlfriend, Neil Gaiman says yes, but unenthusiastic, because girl is young, beautiful, and could have been designed for me in bed.
Such a weird comment to say that another person was designed for you in bed. Like, to me, that's very indicative of the way that this guy thinks that comment. Obviously, just somebody saying that he said that, but...
Kay asks Neil Gaiman for pictures of his new girlfriend. He sends Kay what he calls girl pics, photos of a woman she reminds us of Kay, and Scarlett. We got in touch with her. She met Neil Gaiman at a screening. She was in her early 20s. They became lovers that night, and remained so, on and off, for the decade that followed. This woman recognized some of the sexual acts that I had heard from Kay and Scarlett, but was clear that it was always consensual between her and Neil Gaiman. She said that she loves, respects, and cares about Neil Gaiman, that her experiences with him have been nothing but incredible and positive. She described him as a man who has helped her through difficult times. She is no stranger to those, having had a traumatic childhood.
We first emailed Neil Gaiman to ask for an interview more than 2 months before publication. We said we wanted to ask him about allegations of a pattern of mistreatment of different women over many years, about sexual consent and how it is policed, the dynamics between fans and celebrities, and about status, influence, and power in the context of uneven sexual relationships. His PR responded a week later asking for specific questions in advance. We provided thematic questions. We said we wanted to ask Neil Gaiman about his understanding of sexual consent and how it might have changed over time, for example, or how he maintains appropriate boundaries with young fans, and whether any former sexual partners told him that they felt mistreated by him. We even asked him about using an NDA with any former sexual partners. Neil Gaiman's PR said it still wasn't enough detail, and the PR added that what we were suggesting was deeply offensive and had extremely serious implications for everyone involved.
Remember, like Scott...
Yeah, so from the way they're describing it, he chose not really to respond, even when they asked him directly a couple times and went back and forth trying to make questions that he would answer, but no.
Kay told us that sex with Neil Gaiman became rough straight away. Both women told us they experienced no pleasure, only pain, from the sex, and Kay said she never wanted or enjoyed it. Kay described being in agony, particularly during her April 2007 trip with Neil Gaiman around the UK. A trip during which she alleges he penetrated her vagina with his penis without her consent. An allegation he denies. Threaded throughout this podcast, you have heard Neil Gaiman's position. It is a denial of any non-consensual sex with the women we've spoken to. We have spoken to 2 women friends, one a lover, who had nothing but positive things to say about him. It's worth saying here that we have examined Scarlett and Kay's allegations over many months. We have interviewed and re-interviewed them, spoken to others, combed through emails and messages, reviewed photos and other documents. These 2 women have never met or spoken. They're separated by decades and continents, yet their allegations are consistent. And it's worth saying too, that even coming to journalists poses risks to them of defamation, invasions of their privacy, and, in stories like these, possibly harassment by a dedicated fan base.
What I know for sure...
Yeah, because a lot of times people will say that the women that come out in these situations do it for attention, or that sort of thing. But I mean, usually it doesn't go well for them. They usually have a terrible time of coming out about this stuff.
Is that Scarlett and Kay are clear. They consented to have a relationship with Neil Gaiman, but they didn't consent to the kind of sex he wanted, nor every time he wanted it. They're sure they were abused by him.
So that's where it ends off. And yeah, I don't think you could make a ton of hard conclusions about specific things that went down, but it does seem that Neil has a pattern of just having his way and assuming or acting entitled to women. At least that's my reading of it. Obviously, you can go and listen to the full things if you want to. They'll be linked in the description.